Welcome to the Maverick Mindsets podcast, which was conceived by myself, Rick Lowe, to satisfy my hunger for personal growth. I invite guests onto the show that exhibit all the traits of a true maverick: resilience, courage, success, failure, and purpose. And we get to hear their unique entrepreneurial life journeys and the lessons they've learned. If you want to hear all about managing your mindset and learn how to discover new motivations to improve your physical and mental well-being in the world of life or entrepreneurship and more, there's never been a better time to ignite your own inner maverick by listening to this show. Today on my podcast, I'm delighted to have Rachel Jones as my guest. Rachel is a business leader, entrepreneur, and non-executive director with over 30 years experience in innovation, brand protection, and strategy. She's the founder and former CEO of SnapDragon Monitoring, an award-winning agency she built from scratch after discovering counterfeit versions of her own products online. And after scaling the business globally, Rachel stepped down in 2023 and now focuses on board roles and coaching, including her work with SmartWorks, which helps women return to employment. Known for a thoughtful, empowering leadership style, she brings strategic clarity, operational expertise, and a strong focus on impact to all things around her. I'm really excited about this interview with Rachel. I know there's lots of things she's going to pick out for us to really ruminate on and learn and take forward into our own worlds. So now let's hear from Rachel. Welcome, Rachel. It's a real privilege to have you on Maverick Mindsets. And I know just kind of listening to that biography in terms of, your business leadership, entrepreneurship, and some of the things you're involved with today, even on the philanthropic side, it's going to be a really interesting chat between us today. So I really appreciate you coming on to the show.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm chuffed to bits to be part of it. So thank you.
Pleasure. And obviously we met at when I was speaking at the IPCG, for those people who don't know, the Intellectual Property Crime Group, which it is a body that Rachel's very active in, that in my world of business, and obviously her historical background as well, tries to prevent crime or people stealing other people's intellectual property. And I know you told me when I spoke afterwards over a coffee about your experience of going off to China, and we'll come on to that in a bit, about your experience of what really drove you and made you passionate about the product you developed when you found someone was ripping it off, for want of a better term. And I was really touched by that. I thought it was a really, really interesting story. But I guess initially, having read your bio and all the things you've done and achieved, is give us a sense of what your kind of background was prior to leading up to your first kind of business venture, because I think it'd be great for the listeners and the viewers to get a sense of how that kind of journey, that foundation, if you like.
Thank you. Well, I think I'm a very non-traditional entrepreneur, if that's the category into which I fall. Not in the slightest bit academic background, and really started my first business co-founding it with my husband, well, chap who's now my husband, nigh on 30 years ago, to be perfectly honest, because we saw a need. And actually, I've been driven, I think, to found everything, all three businesses that I've either co-founded or founded, by an absolute passion and a visible need. But actually, when people will pay for what you think they will pay for, then you have got a business. And it's all very well being passionate about something and having a nice idea, but it's not until you know people will actually pay for it that it can be a business. So I think I've been driven by a need, and then seeing that other people needed it too, then off I went.
And you were born in Scotland?
Yeah, born in Scotland, and grew up between Edinburgh and various cities in the US, where my father was a visiting professor. So that was fantastic, being schooled elsewhere, including in Waco, Texas, famous for all the wrong reasons. But that was fantastic. That was absolutely brilliant having that experience. And I'm a true believer in travel, even if it's just 50 miles out with your comfort zone in your own country, just so you look up and look out and you see what other people are doing with the same things that you might have done. I think I really always recommend travel to anybody who's just looking for a bit of inspiration.
Yeah. Yeah. It gives you more of a rounded perspective on life and other people's opinions, which don't always agree with. But there you go.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there was no kind of background in the family on entrepreneurship.
No, not really. My family my mother comes from a farm, so I suppose farmers are all entrepreneurs. So I suppose from that point of view, yes, but no, not really. And I never really saw myself as somebody who would go into business at all. But actually, needs must. And when you can see a need and somebody will pay for it, off you go. It's just a bit random, but it's true. And particularly when it came to my husband and I ran a consultancy, an environmental consultancy 30 years ago, and we were far too early, but we did manage to convince some really big businesses to do their first environmental reports, and that was great. And we sold that business, but along the way had a baby who wriggled a lot, and we wanted to go out and about and travel. And so I used to wrap her up in an old jumper, and eventually I created a product which became the Tot Seat, the washable, squashable high chair for babies who lunch. I'd never made anything, but we were running a consultancy which did a lot of branding, and I thought how very interesting to do this like we're doing for our clients, do something ourselves just to see what it's like. And it did really well. We got phenomenal PR, got it into John Lewis really early on, and started exporting very early on into about 50 odd countries through major retailers such as Boots and El Corte Inglés and people like that around particularly around Europe, North America. And then but I'd only made it because our daughter wriggled, and she wriggled and wriggled, and we just wanted a life where we could travel with her wriggling, but actually she'd stay in one place. And so that was all great, but people bought it. That was fantastic. And then as we hit our 50th country, Japan became our biggest export market, and we moved manufacturing from the UK to China because actually the factory in China was superior to the one that we'd had in the UK, and obviously it wasn't such an expensive exercise to ship from China to Japan. And at that point, we discovered we were being counterfeited. So I hope this is going to be visible, but this was my original product.
Okay.
Tot Seat, and this is one of the counterfeits.
Right.
It's in focus. I'm waiting for it to be in focus, but perhaps it's not going to be in focus. There.
And this is the story you told me when we met about you being totally aghast that someone had basically ripped off your product and was making money off it.
Yeah, it was absolutely ridiculous, totally absurd. I was utterly, the bottom just fell out of my world. I was just enraged that somebody would have the audacity. So I'm sorry, I realised that the background was blurred, although I had asked it not to be. There's the original, there's the fake. They're just so similar. And I just thought, I'm just not having this. I am not having this. This is a baby product into which I put my life and soul, and I'd also raised some investment along the way. So I really needed to not just be looking after my small customers who were, babies 6 months to a year and a half, 2 years old, but also all the people that had supported me along the way and our team. I thought, I'm just not having it. I am not having it. And the fake was seized at Southampton because I had registered with the border agencies. And it was up in Edinburgh with us 24 hours later. And when I opened it, I was just appalled. I mean, it looked, if you were looking at it or buying it online, you just wouldn't know the difference. But of course, once I hold it in my hands, you really do know the difference. And the thing about fakes is that, they might look all right, but you don't know who's made them, what they're made of. They might be made by children. There might be needles in there. The chemicals, you don't know what they are. They've not been through the testing that you put your own product through to take it to market. So I was horrified. So I thought, right, not having it. So I found a couple of enterprising young women from the University of Edinburgh Business School who were Chinese, who helped me identify that the fakes were being sold online. And we could see from the shipping information that they'd been bought in China off the Alibaba platform. So I thought, right, okay, that's Alibaba then. Couldn't engage with Alibaba online. So basically got on a plane.
I think you told me this story of jumping on a plane and flying to China.
Yeah, got on a plane with an enterprising graduate who was really keen to help. She and I went to China, and we sat at Alibaba until they would see us. And they weren't used to. Well, Jet wasn't middle-aged, but I was middle-aged woman from Edinburgh pitching up to say, look, hey guys, this is just not on. And when we were eventually seen, it felt like days we were waiting for them. What it wasn't, but it was like a scene from a bad movie, I suppose. And when we were eventually seen and met by the IP department, who were kind, they were just like, we just can't believe it, because all the fakes we see are luxury product. And I'm like, well, this is not a luxury product. This is a baby product. You're putting my customers and my business at risk. It's just not happening. How do we get rid of these fakes? And they taught me that instead of using complicated legal processes, which is what everybody had talked about when I asked everybody I knew back in the UK, we could use intellectual property to prove my originality and to get the fakes offline. So this was an absolute game changer for me because I didn't know this at all. And I had tried to register Chinese trademarks, but had failed to do so, but had UK registered and many other trademarks, which we can talk about later. And so I was able to use them to remove the fakes from the Alibaba platform. And the Alibaba team was incredibly supportive and helpful and came back to the UK. And we had to pull in all the distribution for the tot seat because we didn't know when the supply chain was being hacked. And I decided, right, well, there are obviously other people who have issues like I do in the toy and in the children's industries. And there were, but nobody really talked about counterfeits because we're talking about 12, 13 years ago. In fact, counterfeiting was a bit like sexually transmitted diseases. You've got to do something about it, but nobody would discuss it. So I thought, well, again, this is just not having it. So off I went, discovered other people had these issues, said, look, will you let me take your fakes offline? It'll really help your reputation. It'll help you keep where your revenue should be going, and you won't have substandard products going out with your name on them. So they said yes. So that was how SnapDragon was born.
Yeah. So that was really your move into developing a software business, right? That from the bad experience you had, literally, of someone taking your intellectual property.
Yeah, absolutely. And it wasn't software based to start with. It was all manual, looking for all, basically monitoring and enforcing about any infringing links, sellers, websites that we found. And then over time, I raised money from venture capitalists and some high net worths, and we have built the software and the team. And now it's a global business. But there was a few years of bootstrapping, uncomfortable bootstrapping, while that went on. But counterfeiting has only become worse.
Yeah.
Well,
we have massive problems, obviously, in the licensed clothing world from people like TikTok Shop and Temu, etc., and Shein. It's rampant, and it probably will get tied up at some point. But it's when you realise what you have to pay for compliance and audits and to make things safe for the consumer, and then you've got flagrant abuse of all the regulations and laws. It is disheartening. But I guess a question for you: what did you feel like when you came back on that plane from China? Did you feel you'd won? Did you feel obviously a lot better that you could move forward, or it must have been a real change of mental experience for you there?
It was, well, I think that the exciting thing was knowing I didn't have to go down the legal route, because when I was asking people what I should do, everyone said, "Oh, use a lawyer," and I was quoted, kind of £50,000-100,000 to deal with this issue, and I'm like, this is just not an option for an SME,
right?
So I think at that point I just thought, I was so pleased that I had taken time to register my intellectual property. So I've always been really passionate about intellectual property, but for no reason other than the fact I love a good trademark. So I had worked really hard to register many trademarks for the tot seat, not just in the UK, but internationally. And this was pre-Brexit. So thankfully, the UK and European trademark were all one the same at that point. But I had actually thought about the fact I was going to be exporting it to different territories and registered the trademarks there. And we had design rights. And these were what actually protected the product going forward. So I was super glad that I actually bothered to learn about IP and to register them for the tot seat. And I continue to say to everybody, if you're taking a product to market or even a service, the most valuable thing you can do is you can protect your IP at the beginning. So I think it on that flight, I was basically a passion was ignited for intellectual property, which I then inadvertently, I suppose, turned into a business.
And then what happened to the baby business then?
Well, it continued we did have a team of 5, but in the end, everybody was made redundant because we had to kind of shrink a bit. And then when I went off to run tot seat, it just sort of became absolutely something that I couldn't give when I went off to run SnapDragon, it became something that I just couldn't give my time and energy to.
Yeah. And but all the skills you learned from those very early days of running it, I guess, starting off from your kitchen table like we've all done,
yes,
you probably are all transferable skills.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, thankfully, I've never had to sit at the kitchen table overnight again and, wrap up thousands of bits of fabric, which is what I did with the top seat for, years and years when the first thousands were being manufactured.
Yeah.
But absolutely it is. I mean, it's all about people, I think, in the main. Any business is about people. People buy from people, and that is absolutely key, I always think. But then, it's all about cash flow and supply chain and, managing the risks and resilience and all the rest of it, keeping your customers and your reputation and all the rest of it. I think the supply chain piece is really important because that has become increasingly infiltrated over the years. I mean, I don't mean my one, but supply chains in general. It is much easier now for fraudsters to infiltrate supply chain. I think that's really tough for major brands that have parallel supply chains running alongside, and that's one of the things that we look for at Snapdragon to see where different counterfeits are coming from. I mean, even in my own example, one of these fake top seats came from China and another one came from Mexico. So I think sometimes when people have counterfeits, they don't necessarily think they come from different places, but actually several people can be ripping you off at the same time.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Particularly from major brands like you were talking about earlier on.
And I get asked when I'm talking to other businesses, and it's something we're in the process of doing now in terms of scaling up. And you get that whole international scaling piece that you've got to try and manage. What's some of your advice around when to go international for a business?
Right. Well, not everybody always agrees with this, but I am a massive fan in export and internationalization. I believe that there is so much potential. So I will always go international as early as possible. And the top seat went international really quickly because we went to a trade fair overseas and we had already translated the instructions into about 17 languages. And so people took us seriously because they knew that we were really interested in going into Japan because the instructions were in Japanese, or to Lithuania because we were in Lithuanian, etc., etc. And with Snapdragon, because counterfeiting and online threats are global, we can work with clients anywhere in the world. So I believe passionately in export and internationalization. And I think my biggest tip would be have people who know the market or speak the languages in the territory in which you are interested, and protect your IP in that territory before you go into it if you possibly can.
Yeah, no, interesting on that one. And I guess it's like all parts of business growth, Rachel, they're all fraught with elements of danger, but unless you push the boundaries, you'll never get out of where you're at, really, will you?
No, absolutely. And it always really makes me laugh, but in the enterprise agencies in Scotland always consider England as export, which always worries me a bit. But I just think that when you've got when you have a customer base, whether it's for a service or a product that can be global, absolutely. Why wouldn't you look for it?
No, for sure. And in that Snapdragon journey, you obviously had to go out and raise some money. How easy was it for you to do that?
An interesting question. So if I had known that women only raise 2% of all venture capital,
which apparently is true, right? That is a fact still today. I read that.
Yeah, I'm sorry to tell you that is actually a fact. It remains a fact. If I had known that in advance, I probably would never have started. I was very lucky because as I was starting out, I met the venture capital group, Mercia, who are still with us today and have followed on every round. So I met them very early on. So when I first started raising, I had kind of raised millions in tranches. And then the worst raise was over COVID. We basically had just launched a fundraise a month before the pandemic hit. And so I basically was pitching through COVID to lots of people, which was slightly soul destroying. But at the end of the process, at the end of the year, the round was oversubscribed, and that was amazing. I would say that those were my lowest moments in terms of the fundraising. We've been very lucky with the people who have supported us, but they've seen the growth that they wanted. And they've also seen us Snapdragon keep ahead of the sorts of challenges that we're seeing online. They've really changed. In the early days, 12, 13 years ago, we were interested in monitoring, Alibaba and Amazon and eBay. But my goodness me, it's not just about them nowadays. There are hundreds and hundreds of platforms that you monitor for clients, and social media is a much bigger issue, and fake domains and impersonation. So all of these things now need to be included, and we just have to try and keep at least 3 steps ahead of the fraudsters every day of the week.
Yeah. And in terms of some of your biggest challenges in that journey on Snapdragon, just share with us what some of those were.
Well, the biggest challenge was, without a doubt, was COVID. Without a doubt, not only were we doing a fundraise, but within about 3 weeks of the pandemic, we had lost 45% of our income. Wow. Because many of the products that we were protecting were sold in shops. The shops were shut. Yeah. So that was incredibly tough, and we just had to kind of keep the wheels on the bus. So that was a massive. Yeah, that was really tough. That was definitely the toughest bits of the business journey for me. Trying to keep 27 people employed, using a bit of the furlough, ensuring that people were kept kind of sane. And I think the biggest risk I took at that point was we had an offer. Cash was really tight, and we had an offer from a venture capital firm who were basically making me jump through hoops in terms of the numbers of spreadsheets on projections and all the rest. And I was up one night doing the 17th iteration of the spreadsheet or something. It was like 2 a.m. And I just thought, this is driving me nuts. And if this is how we're working now, it's not going to work. It's just not going to work. So I decided in the morning to pull out. And so I rang them in the morning and said, look, thanks very much for all your support, but actually you're not the guys for us. And we were really, really close to the wire, really close to the wire. It was a massive risk, but I just decided that actually we'd be better off going bust than actually trying to work with these people. It wasn't going to work. So we were either going to go bust on our own, or we're going to go bust with these people. And that would have been a miserable exercise. I mean, either way. Anyway, the next day, actually, we were incredibly lucky, and we survived because money came in the next day, which just changed our lives, and off we went. But it was a very sticky 24 hours.
Well, look, I mean, all entrepreneurs have got those experiences, sadly, or well, it probably makes you stronger, yeah? And we talk about that in a sec. But I mean, in terms of women in business and women raising money, and that statistic you just shared of the 2% of money raised is for women. What advice have you got for women going out and presenting their business? Is there anything, with the odds still stacked against them in what's available, what would you advise them how to deal with that? Just to get on with it, or are there some skill sets or ideas you've got for them?
Well, I think that if you have a decent product or service that people will pay for, and you can prove that people will pay for it, and you've got a good team around you, there's absolutely no reason why you shouldn't raise the money that you need, that you can, as long as you can prove you need it. I mean, if I can do it, anybody can do it. But I proved, before I went looking for money, I bootstrapped Snapdragon long enough to prove that a lot of people would pay for what I was doing. So I wasn't going out saying, oh, I think it's quite a nice idea and I wonder. I didn't have the wonder. I had utter proof. I had distinct proof in the bank account that people would pay for what we were doing. And we knew the problem was only going to get worse. So I always say that to people. And the other thing I say to folks is that actually raising money isn't always the answer for everybody. The most important thing for any business is sales. So let's get the sales in. Folks, I do lots of mentoring and coaching, which I love. But when people come to me and say, I want to raise money, I quite often say, well, let's look at the sales. Let's get the sales up, and then we'll worry about whether you do need to raise money. Because sometimes you don't. If the sales generate enough profit when you start, you don't need to raise money. And there are other ways of getting money into the system, loans, and I mean, you max out your credit card and debt and invoice finance and all sorts of things. So investment isn't always the way forward for everybody.
No, sure. And also investment comes with someone else, Rachel, as you know, wanting to make decisions and having an opinion. And that's a big challenge for entrepreneurs, that control aspect.
Well, you hope that they will be useful. You hope that your investors bring interest, passion, knowledge, experience, and a network to your board table if they're going to join the board. And that's definitely what we have been lucky enough to receive. But you make your own luck in those situations. You choose people,
Yeah.
choose investors you want to work with, do your research. Don't be pitching to somebody who funds bakery products if you're a SaaS. But people sometimes don't think like that. They just think, oh, that I must get myself out.
Yeah, yeah. No,
Wasting everybody's time.
Look, we're in a very tricky situation geopolitically, aren't we? With what's going on out there. One minute there's tariffs, there's all these kind of trade tensions, regulations, obviously what's going on in the Middle East, and now we've got supply chain disruption. What's your advice for entrepreneurs and business leaders in a state of the economy that we're in?
Well, I think putting people at the top is utterly key. I think you need to support your team, train them, and encourage them as much as you possibly can. And these can be good moments for encouraging innovation. So I think that's a good thing. I think you need to keep your customers happy and your reputation solid. I think these are always really, really important. I, of course, would always go on about your intellectual property. So make sure that your intellectual property is solid. Register, protect it, enforce against anybody who's infringing. An eye on your cost base. You can, much as all these things are going on round about us, we know what we're spending. We should know our cost bases, and we should know where we can tighten belts as and when we might have to. Yeah. And when it comes to your supply chain, again, lots of things you can't influence, but lots of things you can. And the better the relationship you have with all the bits of your supply chain, one-on-one relationships rather than through agents, the better. So that's a kind of handful of things that I would be prioritizing.
No, it's interesting you talk about those kind of relationships, because a big thing I've been thinking about is a lot of the value in a business is your relationship. So, and especially if you're the CEO, it's making sure that those relationships you're close enough to and you nurture them, because when you do have challenges, it's through those partnerships that you're going to find a better way of getting through. That's where your resilience lies, in a sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, and also, I mean, that's as true with your team as well. If you treat your team well, they'll go to the end of the earth for you.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to talk about teamwork in a sec, but another question for you on that kind of control. Do you think some leaders waste time worrying about things that they can't control, and how do we even break through that mindset?
Oh, well, we all do. I mean, who doesn't? Who doesn't worry about things that they can't control? I think we all do that. I think it's good to have other people to talk to in similar situations. So there are lots and lots of groups nowadays, aren't there, where leaders can get together to kind of share and battle out some of the things which are bothering people. I find that the best thing for me is to get some fresh air first thing in the morning, and just try and identify what's important and what's urgent. They can go based on that. When under a lot of pressure, then a bit of fresh air, a bit of blue sky. I know I'm in Scotland, but we do get it occasionally, a bit of bird song, and just trying to keep things in perspective. I think it's quite easy not to keep things in perspective. And I think actually sometimes just turning the news off for a few days is a good thing. I know it's a bit random and it sounds like I'm putting my head in a bucket, but actually sometimes it's not helping.
No, I mean, especially more recently, because it becomes a bit obsessive. And actually, me sitting in London, you sitting in Scotland, it's very little we can do to effect any form of control or change on it. But what we can do is control the things that were in our gift. And actually, it's very empowering when you focus on that, because you actually start to do what you're good at and you start to move forward generally.
Yeah, I think so. I think keeping things in perspective is difficult, but important. And just trying to remember what you're trying to do. You are trying to sell whatever it is you're trying to sell, so that your customers are happy and you're doing a really good job and you're making a profit while you do it. And sometimes just the basics are the key things to be thinking about.
Yeah. No, look, and also, diving back into your kind of bio, obviously there's the entrepreneur journey. There's a lot about the philanthropic work you do, but also you've got the non-executive director role as well with a few companies. And I was wondering how you've shifted from someone who's very much in the driving seat to someone who's sitting on the sidelines, with your knowledge and experience, do you get frustrated that you can't get behind the steering wheel, or are you quite comfortable?
I think it depends very much on what it is. I mean, I was a non-exec of one of the one of Scotland's premier angel investment groups, which was very much kind of sit on the sidelines and be an NED from a governance point of view. Absolutely superb organisation called Equity Gap. But I'm an NED for a business called Glencraft, and we manufacture luxury mattresses, but 70% of the workforce are blind or visually impaired. And the products are fantastic. If you need a new mattress, this is where you need to go. But the wonderful thing about that is that it's slightly more involved, and that members of the board have specific projects to be involved in. So that's really nice. So it's very much kind of guidance from an NED point of view, but there are specific things where our skills can be useful. And as I have a little bit of background in manufacturing, I'm really interested in the manufacturing aspect of it and the supply chain and all the rest of it, and the innovation. So that's really good. And then I also am on the management board of a community shop, where again it's very much about guidance and much less about going into the shop and pricing things up. That's not what I'm up for.
Yeah. No, interesting. And then looking across that rich tapestry of your business career, teamwork kind of jumps out at me. And you must have been in so many. You've built teams, you've led teams, you've managed teams, you've worked in philanthropic endeavors, also with your non-exec. Just give me some of the facets of building a team.
Oh gosh. Well, I have always worked on, when I am in charge of, and put that in inverted commas, the recruitment of a team. I recruit for grit, because I believe that skills can be taught. And certainly at SnapDragon, that was the way I went about building the team there, because you needed a certain amount of resilience to join a business that's been bootstrapped. But even at SmartWorks, which is a charity which empowers unemployed women into work, the same kind of thing was true of building the team. It was bringing people together for a common good. I think that's really important. So what you need is people who can kind of share your passion and your vision, and who will understand that they're allowed to be creative, with guidance. But also that everybody can reflect, and some things will work and some things won't work, and actually having an open enough relationship with everybody so that you can say, well, that worked and that didn't work, but let's go forward. I believe passionately in training the team and developing as much as possible and promoting internally and all this kind of thing, but also listening to the coalface. So if you've got a shop, and the people who are serving in the shop are dealing with the customers, and you need to hear what that's all about. If you're removed from it, you absolutely need to know what those relationships are like. If you don't have the relationship with the customers, you need to listen to the people who do.
Yeah.
So I think all of these things are really, really important.
No, because really without that team, the team determines the speed of the business, doesn't it? And actually, part of the journey of an entrepreneur is getting out of your own way, really, sometimes, isn't it? And letting other people who are probably better than you at certain things.
Always recruit better people who are better than you at everything. Absolutely, definitely.
And what's your best skill set, or best skill?
Positivity and optimism, I think.
Very important, especially today.
I think probably vision, maybe bring people together. Positivity and optimism would definitely be top my list. I think I've been a kind leader. I think I can be tough, but I think people are my number one priority.
Okay. And what do you have, like a daily method of operation, daily habits that keep you disciplined, focused? What are some of those? How do you run your life?
Well, I'm a great kind of get out early, fresh air, and just kind of get your head into gear for the day person. That's my kind of modus operandi. And if I don't manage to do that, then life can get a bit complicated. So I keep lists and I write everything down. So much as the world is modern and we're all tapping things into computers and all the rest of it, I actually write lists with a coloured pen. So I've always got a purple or a green pen on me. I write lists. And I try to decide at the beginning of every day what's urgent, what's important, and just have a list that I try and work through. Very dull, but it has worked for me.
And do you have a way of running meetings? I mean, because I was reading yesterday in the Times actually about how meetings creep has just pervaded every element of business now. Some people are just back-to-back meetings all day, and there's no real action point. There's no real outcome or accountability. I mean, and time is finite, isn't it?
Well, I think meetings need to run to time. So I get very cross if meetings start late or end late. And if I'm cheering them, which I frequently am, then if you come into one of my meetings and it's starting at 1 and finishing at 2, then that will be pretty much how the meeting runs.
Yeah.
But I think before one goes into a meeting, you need to know what you want out of it. And there's no point just coming along to the meeting just to show your face. I mean, why bother if that's all you're going to do? What do you want out of that meeting? What's the purpose of the meeting? What's it trying to achieve? And how are we going to go forward at the end of it? Mm. The other thing that really irritates me is when you don't get a summary or, minutes or whatever it is quickly, because actually if you take too long, A, you've forgotten about it, B, you've lost interest, and 3, the time has passed when actually you needed to act on something really quickly. So those are the things that I take into the meetings that I chair and hopefully deliver at the end of the meeting.
Mm. Oh, interesting. And it comes down to that discipline, especially as you grow and as your team grows and you get different dynamics in the business. You've got to constantly make sure in my learnings how that communication flow is best served, and every 6 months challenge what you're doing. Even yourself. Am I spending the best use of my time? Monday to Friday. What else could I be doing, and what shouldn't I be doing? And that's part of that journey of growth, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And as you've proven with your own career, ask a busy person to do something, and they're more likely to be able to do it than somebody who's twiddling their thumbs.
Yeah. And what's one piece of advice that you can give leaders in a time of uncertainty?
Well, I think it's all about always surrounding yourself with the best people, as we've talked about earlier on. And then my 2 a.m. test, are the people that you're working with or doing something for at 2 a.m., is that really irritating you? Are they going to be with you to sail that ship into the storm? Mm. And if not, then they're probably not the right people. So those are the two things that I really would think. And then for anybody, whether they're a leader or not, I still believe that travel is one of the best things that you can do, whether you're young or old. Great for just seeing how the world is somewhere else. You see solutions to problems, you open your eyes, you see new people, you hear things that will change the way you look at things. So I still think that any opportunity to travel out with your comfort zone, whether it's 50 miles or 5,000 miles, is something that should be grabbed.
All about broadening new horizons.
Yeah, definitely.
And then, quick last question: best and worst business advice you've ever had?
Well, I've had lots of bad advice. Whether I've taken, I have sometimes taken it, but it's mostly been about, you need me or you need my consultancy to deliver this, that, and the next thing. So I've wasted a bit of money on that over the years. I think sometimes the best advice is to trust yourself with a good team to know that you're going to make the decisions. But when it comes to raising money or setting off, starting a business, if what you're trying to do can make money and you can prove that it will make money, people will buy it, then I think that's a good reason to start. I think, having a passion is one thing, but you absolutely need to know that it will make money.
Yeah, interesting. Look, it's been a fascinating chat. I mean, some of the things I've noted down here, you talked about business is really about people. We talked about that whole team approach and trusting that team and getting people who want to stay on the bus and ride into that storm is really important. You talked about international growth and the significance of it. And I guess not being afraid, Rachel, to push yourself and get someone in the mix in the country that understands the culture and the language probably as well. Big one for me is sales revenue. I think we've all been there in business. We see it all the time. It is the number one thing. That what cash you've got in the bank and what are you going to do today to push that boulder further up the hill is really important. And it involves sales and revenue, because everything else falls off the back of it. I like you talking about the importance of reputation, because it takes years to build and trust, and it can evaporate instantaneously if you're not careful. And I know we touched on that piece about relationships as well, in terms of making sure we cultivate those, and in those difficult times, of similar to what you were talking about in COVID, how it's really important. And then some of your daily methods of looking at what's important and urgent, and it constantly gets reshaped. And you at the top of the tree have got to be really attuned to where to spend. Yeah, someone once said to me, Rachel, you should ask yourself every hour, what's the best use of my time right now? Very difficult question to ask.
Yeah.
Answer, should I say, but it really focuses your mind, doesn't it? And it's so easy to get blown off course with focus.
Oh, terribly easy. Yeah, no, I absolutely. I'm very good at being blown off course. I've recently taken up drumming, and sounds a bit random, but it's perfectly true. And actually, that's great for focus, because actually you have to do it. You have the lesson, and you have your practice, and you've actually got to do it. And if you're not going to practice, then it's not going to go forward. But it's been a very good exercise in actually taking on a completely new, well, I can hardly call that a skill yet, but just making sure that, for that hour, you're absolutely focused on that. And I should take my own medicine, a bit of my own medicine, and make sure that I'm truly focused on.
Well, one of the challenges we have as entrepreneurs is to switch off, isn't it? I mean, I'm guilty of it. Vicky, the girlfriend, used to say to me, if I go home and see the kids, my mind's elsewhere. Because if I go straight from work, I've not defrosted, by the time I get through the front door, my work, and it's I found it very hard to turn your mind off, because as a natural business person, you're constantly thinking about what can I be doing, how can I evolve and effect some change, etc. And it is a real challenge. And I like your piece about positivity and optimism. There's nothing worse than being around negative people who, we can't do that because every day we've got challenges. If you're optimistic, you've got half a chance of getting through it.
And also, I think if you're being optimistic about things, you can try different things as well. Allow yourself the possibility of a positive outcome. It might work, but if you don't try, you'll never know.
Yeah. And that important piece about your shared passion with the team, because, we can't get there on our own, can we? We do need the right people at the right speed at the right time. And it's amazing what people can deliver once you've instilled that kind of vision and passion, around them.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's definitely one of the reasons that, Snapdragon's done so well, because people understand, when we're talking to clients or potential clients, they know that, I went through the absolute hell of having counterfeits. So when you're thinking about counterfeiting as being a $500 billion a year industry, they and how it affects businesses, in terms of lost revenues and reputation and customers and all the rest of it, they know that we totally understand what that is like. And so we will work, really hard to, protect their brands in whatever territories they're operating in.
No, great. Look, Rachel, it's been a real pleasure to talk, and there's so many learnings in there. I really appreciate your insight. You're a very inspirational lady. All the plates you're spinning. And again, huge credit for you to getting on that plane and going and sorting the Chinese out. Well done.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me along. It's been a privilege to share my story. I'm sorry it was all a bit blurred when you were looking at it earlier on, but anyway, thank you.
Very good. You are a true maverick. Thank you very, very much.
Well, I'll take that as an enormous compliment. Thank you very much, Rick. Thank you.